Hello everybody, it's Claire back with another art journal video. This is a follow-on from that unboxing that I did of the Paul Rubens artist grade watercolours. Here I am just having a bit of a play. So I am playing on the watercolour paper that came from the company as well. I've cut it into quarters, added some water onto the background, and I'm just kind of showing you how beautifully these colours bleed out when you drop them onto the watercolour paper. Now I know there will be a technical term for this. I don't know what it is because I am not a technical watercolour artist. I just like to have a play really, and for me the mixed media element is that I can use these as a nice background and then go in and add more things over the top as well. But look at how beautifully they move on those with that wet and on wet technique, just letting the colours kind of play with each other. And this watercolour paper holds up really well to all this moisture as well. So I've created those little backgrounds, just playing and going in and adding splatters of colour and watching how they react on top of each other. I mean, like, you could just literally get lost just making more and more backgrounds, really. So pretty. And certainly I think the wet on wet technique is a lot of fun. So here I've dried my brush and then I'm just going in and lifting some of the paint off and creating those kind of empty spaces by removing the paint from the background with my dry brush. Okay, so now I am painting some rainbow stripes onto my page. I'm working quite fast because I wanted the paint to stay wet. I have sped this up a little bit though, but obviously it wasn't working quite this fast. I am washing my brush and drying it off a little bit in between, just so that it's not too soggy. But then I'm just keeping these kind of stripes on my page. Then I'm going in and spritzing it and letting the colours run and move and blend a little bit. I often use the same cloth just to kind of mop up any excess bits where the paint gathers or it makes a muddy colour, because I don't really like that. It's not really my jam. But yeah, lots of fun. You can see how nice the watercolour paper is as well to play on. So I'm giving these a heat dry. I mean, I do think watercolours are better if you can let them dry by themselves. I think they make some really interesting patterns and shapes, but I am far too impatient for that. So next I've gone onto a big sheet, and of course I'm playing with those bright vibrant rainbow colours and just adding some dots of colour onto the paper. So again, that wet on wet technique and just letting it bleed. Now I am being careful here not to put colours next to each other that are going to make mud. And if that happens, I'm just going to go in and kind of remove them from near each other. But it is fun just watching how these colours bleed out. And anywhere where, like you can see, where the colour's not quite moving fast enough, I'm just giving it another spritz of water and letting it do its thing. So I think by letting the colours move, I'm not pushing them around with my brush a great deal. There's less chance of making muddy colours, but yeah, you can see just having so much fun. So then what you can do with a cloth or a tissue is you can go in and then just lift any paint off where you feel it's kind of puddling a bit too much. Yeah, another technique you could do with this would be to pop a stencil on and then mop through with a tissue and soak up any of the excess. You should then get an imprint of the stencil in the background that you've created. Yeah, just adding splatters. I am really just letting the paints do their own thing here. So this is just kind of sharing with you just some ways that I had to play with these paints. And they are going to be my Let's Go on Holiday with some watercolour paint set that I take, I think, because they are just such pretty colours. Then I had to go at painting through the stencil. This is an Art by Marlene stencil. I did this a few times. I think the secret with this is not to have your brush too wet, because it will leak underneath the stencil, but you do get an idea of the imprint of the stencil through the paint. And I kind of really like this technique. This isn't something that I do a lot, but there is definitely a learning curve for how much paint and moisture to have on your brush. And I'm using a nice sort of flat brush for this as well, just so it was easier to get that paint on. I mean, even that looks pretty, doesn't it? So before I lift the stencil, I'm giving it a quick dry. And then once it's dry enough, I'm going to lift the stencil off, and you will see in some places you can see that stencil imprint through. Really pretty. So I did that with a couple of other stencils as well on the pieces that I'd done. And here I'm just outlining some of those patterns that one of the stencils left behind, just pulling those into the foreground. So again, it's just about creating those layers and patterns and shapes that you can use in your journal pages, and kind of pulling bits forward, pushing things away. Added a bit of stamping as well. Then I decided I'd add a bit of a shadow to some of these shapes, crosses that are on my piece of card. Then I started overthinking where the shadow would be. Oh dear, the curse of the overthinker, that's definitely me. Anyhow, then I'm going to add some images on. So these are art by Marlene, like paper elements that she makes, and just some mark making as well using the watercolours. I've also done a bit of stenciling using some acrylic paint over the top, so you can see you can layer other mediums over the top of it too. And then I'm going to add a quote onto this as well. A little bit of mark making too. Okay, so those are the backgrounds I created on that one. Really, really pretty colours. And the swatchy one that you will have seen in the previous video. And those are the paints. Okay, so then I think there's one last little mini project to share. I lie, there's two. So what I stuck two of the pieces of card back to back and made like a little tip in for my journal. So all that is just a piece that you literally tape into your book. And that was quite a nice way to use that. So here I am playing with the watercolours again. So first of all, I'm painting with water, and then I am just dropping the colour into the water and letting it move all by itself. Oh my gosh, this was so addictive. So painting those swirly lines and then just dropping the paint in. It's like being a magician. It's like going abracadabra, abracadabra. Isn't it amazing? If you've never ever had a go at this, you've got to have a try with watercolours. Oh my gosh, it is so much fun. You can create a really, really pretty background with all sorts of shapes. The paint will only go where the water is, so it will only travel where those lines are. And as you can see, you can even mix colours in them too, in the lines too. You can do like a darker colour at one end and a lighter one at the other, and they'll mix in the middle. So there are so many possibilities. You do need to put down a fair amount of water, but yeah, it is lots of fun watching how those colours travel around the watermarks that you make. As you can see, my water's getting gradually muckier in my water jar. Yeah, so I kind of filled the page using this technique, and here you can see I've joined onto the orange one as well there, but it doesn't matter because the colours are going to mix. Yeah, so lots of fun to be had using this little technique. I'm just going in some places and adding more colour. And then finding spaces where I could add more, because More is better, isn't it? And so you see here where I've sort of noticed that there's little blobs of paint. I'm going in and adding more lines and letting them join on, so that those colours can travel even more. So these paints are lovely for that too. So not only are they pigmented and creamy, but they will also travel really nicely in the wet on wet technique, because I've shown a lot of ideas using that. I think that's one of my favourite ways to play. Okay, so one side got that dry. I then folded it into a zine. No idea how people say that. I never get it right. So a simple fold that you can do to create a book from one piece of paper. This created a really fun background. There's always a better way to fold it. It'll kind of let you know which way it wants to fold. It'll just settle easier. And if you glue it, stick it down carefully, you can make pockets. I then used one of the swatchy pieces that I created to make some tabs and stapled those onto my pages as well. So I've got this little book tucked away somewhere in my art studio, and I will do something with it, but just kind of sharing this idea of a way that you can use backgrounds that you've had fun making and make fun little books with them. I love making books with my like just mini books. Sometimes working small is so much fun. So thanks for sticking with it. Thanks for watching. I hope you've enjoyed the video, and I hope to see you again soon.